In today's video, we are going to take a listen to Pastor Ronkelly answering some questions. Those type of, town hall discussions, Q&A segments, they really help to not only balance and get to the heart of some of the issues in our beloved church, but also to hear the heart of Pastor Ronkelly. I'll tell you what, I really appreciate this man. I admire this man. He's like top 3 now as far as one of my favorite preachers in the Adventist church. But I can give you a whole list of some people that I love. Listening to a number of his messages, I realized this is probably one of the most balanced ministers I have ever listened to. And the man is full of grace and truth. So I really appreciate that. I don't like to say too much about a single man, but Pastor Ronkelly has earned my respect over the years. Now, I want to get into the discussion very quickly. So let's fast forward. Let's start somewhere about 19 minutes and 22 seconds. A question is going to be asked about politics and how the church is to relate to it, how the discussion can be had without neutralizing the things that matters the most. And I want you to hear what Pastor Ronkelly has to say, and we share some thoughts as we go.
I've been in 2 different churches and had two incidences in one church and another incident in another church. One was at the table during an evangelistic series, Bible study, when we had guests that were at the table. Another time was hearing it from the pulpit, and the other time was over a fellowship meal after church. And what it is it's politics. And,
politics?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've had to turn to someone. I turned to someone in the fellowship hall, this is years ago, and I had to say, excuse me, there may be guests in the room and we don't know their affiliation. Could you please not talk about this? Another time, I heard it from the pulpit and I got into a bunch of trouble because I left the room and stood at the back and just went like this because I did not want to hear any more from the pulpit, and I was called on the carpet for that. And another time somebody called me, she didn't directly call me, but I don't know. Anyway, I don't know how to handle it. I tried to handle it myself and it doesn't work. So I go to the pastor, and if I don't get it through the pastor, then where do you go so that people aren't talking politics? And I'm not talking about Daniel and Revelation and the papacy and stuff like that. I'm talking the politics from the pulpit.
Okay, good question. I do want to encourage everybody, as much as this part of the world may be typically very right-leaning, conservative politically, that you bring up an exceptional point. So I'd like to kind of divide it into 2 subjects. In the early days of Adventism, most of the Adventist posture on abolition was completely Republican. James White would go so far as to say that everybody needed to vote for Abraham Lincoln. That doesn't make it right that he said that, but abolition was a Republican platform in the 1860s. So the difference between running down Joe Biden or Donald Trump is a little different than the subject matter, which has its own political attachments. So Ellen White would go so far as to say, if you did not believe in abolition, there was no place for you. You didn't really deserve to be enrolled on the books of the remnant church. So I just want to make sure that we don't moralize as wrong all cultural discussions because one half of the political spectrum is aligned with maybe how we're thinking. But Ellen White will talk about avoiding not the moral issues that are in society that may be left or right, but she will talk about getting in the way of the gospel by just dealing in the raw politics of person and party. So I think it's party politics that we are to avoid. If you voted for this person or that person, that's your business. It's not a very good idea, typically, to delve into that, especially if you're not with friends, where it seems like a reasonable discussion, because there may be somebody there who stumbles over your party politics. But when the last 5 years we went through, we did see political alignment around some of the subjects that were in the culture. So for instance, mandates. Not the vaccine, although the vaccine was mandated. Mandates did end up having a more robust opposition inside the Republican Party. They were against them. Whereas the Democratic Party was pushing that if you love your neighbor, you need to do this. So I think it is important that we don't hang our hopes on any human politicians. They're going to all disappoint us. It doesn't matter what side they're on. The problem is we're watching the value system of America do this so terribly that when it gets way over here, we'd like it to get here, but we may pick way over here. And recently I was somewhere else and I walked by a door on a room and it said no kings. And I didn't even know what it was talking about until I got to where I could watch the news. And no kings. And so I don't even want to go into it, but I will say this. The top that used to spin is wobbling. When it falls over, I don't know, but we don't want to make party politics at the center of anything we're doing. But we cannot avoid the discussions that impinge, in this case, on religious liberty. That's my belief. Religious liberty for the African American 150 years ago was abolition. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church landed squarely on the side of abolition. Was it political? You could make a case it was, but it wasn't party politics. It was morality that was aligning. If it aligned, great. Some people got mad at us in Village. They voted into the Constitution of the Michigan State Legislature a law enshrining the protection of an abortion. The doctor that was on my staff at that point in time got up and made a video about it, and boy, some people came unglued over it. The Bible says Christians defend the defenseless. I don't know anybody more defenseless than a baby in the womb. And I don't want to oversimplify the complicating dynamics that come occasionally, but those are the exceptions, not the rule.
Understanding the difference between the issues and aligning with a particular party is two different things. Fighting for certain policies that are more aligned with biblical values is fair and is true and is right. Whether or not it is a Republican thing or a Democrat thing doesn't really matter. The issue, human rights, religious liberty, civil respect, protecting the innocents, it should not be a political thing, right? So for example, when it comes to the child trafficking issue, and we talk about what matters the most on the issue to address the policy so that there can be positive changes made. So whichever party is going to protect little children from such a terrible case of abuses, well, maybe we should stand and vote for policies that will protect that. That just only makes sense. Doesn't matter which party it is. So that's the way we have to think about it when it comes to us as Christians. Now, I want to fast forward. There was a question on the floor about ADRA. And there, Pastor Ronkelly went on to speak a little bit about the numbers, what the concerns that he has. He also spoke about our channel and what are some things we do, and also Brother Lawrence. And I want you to hear what he says.
Including its unions, conferences uses a standardized wage scale for its employees, including administrators. These are not for profit, and religious and executive compensation is far lower than that of corporate CEOs or similar sector. Typical union conference president in the U.S. makes somewhere in the low six figures or less, often tied to the denominational wage factor, which varies by region and cost of living, benefits, and so on. So I know when I pastored, they had this thing called 150% remuneration factor, depending on how many years you had served. And I think my ending salary there was probably close to $50,000 a year. I never heard of this kind of figures here.
I don't think those figures are accurate. The president in the Michigan conference may make 5 or 10% more than the pastors. I think my salary when I ended was $62,000. Mm-hmm. So no pastor's getting rich, and I don't think the administrators have their hands in the till. One of the issues that came up in the General Conference was administrators getting paid to serve on boards for ADRA. That's right. And I think that needs to be examined and fixed but I don't think the administrators are the union probably makes maybe 5 or 10% more than the conference, but they've tried to hold them to where we don't work for money. So I think somebody's off on that.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Well, the issue that you brought up about the ADRA salaries, U.S. aid, I assume that's where that's coming from, NGOs, they were saying that Ted Wilson was in $120,000 a year. I assume that's over and above his tithe-paid salary. And then Ayrton Cooler is like $150,000.
Yeah, you can get online and look at the ADRA 990. If anybody wants to do it, Google ADRA 990 2023. And you can look, nonprofits are required to report. ADRA has to report, the General Conference has to report.
Yeah.
And it'll show you compensation for the top 10 or whatever amount of employees they have. And the challenge is that some of our presidents are living in very expensive places. Some of them are making, if you want to put 5 or 10% more on, I'm no expert on the finances of the church. I've sat on a lot of committees. But it wouldn't surprise me if the General Conference president's making around $100,000 a year. It appeared by my reading of the 990s that some of them were getting more than what we might consider reasonable honorarium for sitting on the board of ADRA. The problem is, it doesn't appear that there's really any forum to talk about this. I do think that people like Brother Lawrence and James DeValian with Adventist Media Connect and some of these people have created a necessary discussion. If we can do it without being negative, it needs to be done. That's my sense. But our denominational employees, including our presidents, they're not making, everybody's working, at least most everybody's working for a missionary wage.
Pastor ronkelly is so fair. Even in the midst of the heat, he refuses to throw Ayrton Cooler or former President Ted Wilson under the bus, or even our ministers. Of course, they are working hard. They should be paid. And we know it comes with a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of stress that comes with that. I don't make an argument for payment when it comes to men in responsible positions so much. I make an argument against unbiblical policies. I'm making arguments against official statements. I'm making arguments against UN. I'm making arguments against the things that are impacting the body of Christ and that are violating the liberty of conscience of Seventh-day Adventists. These are the things we take an issue with. We don't make a doctrinal argument so much. We make an argument against the structure in a sense that it is going in contradiction to biblical views and values in respecting of religious liberty of the members of their church. This is why we push back against some of the principles. What Pastor ronkelly says about Brother Lawrence, Advent Media Connect, I can also add The Balanced View, 6-7 News, and a few more other channels, is even though sometimes we are sadly misunderstood and mischaracterized by some other ministries who do not understand what we are doing, I think Pastor ronkelly, having listened to just a few videos, has a much better assessment of what the goal is than people who have come over our channels and felt the need to simply point the finger and say, you are just being critical of the church. Like, no, we are opening the conversations. We are making it possible for the conversation that could be had to take place so that these issues could be addressed. And we're trying to at least talk about all sides of the issue as much as we can. And just like you said, we want to be as gracious as possible when we talk about these issues, but we're not going to cover them up. We're not going to hide it and act like these things don't exist. Some ministries can choose to do that, and we respect them for doing that, but that's not the call that God has given us. We feel like we have a burden on our hearts to speak about not only what's happening in the world, not only Bible prophecy, some of the principles and the doctrines that of the church, to defend them. But if there are things going on in our beloved church that are not in accordance to God's order and is violating the liberty of conscience of his members, why should we stay quiet about that? Where is the safety in that, right? There has to be a call to address the issue within as well as what's happening without. Pastor Ronkelly is totally on point about that assessment of our channel, and I really hope and pray others could take a minute to listen before you criticize us as just the rest of them. We do understand there are some extreme ministries out there who are doing things, and we do not side with their view. There are some ministries who cannot speak of anything positive when it comes to the organization of our church, the structure, the leadership. They only think negativity. We don't want to be like that. But at the same time, we're not going to close our eyes to the real issues for what they are. We will call them out as well. But we want to do it all in a Christ-like spirit. Sometimes I will admit, I personally don't always reach the standard. This is one of the reasons why we have what is called the Watchman Report on Thursday. I brought several individuals to share a thought than just me listening to myself talking on the issue. I'm just one man. So different people with different views. We have 4 gospels for a reason. Why? Because it's still the same subject, but different perspective and approach to the same idea that will help us to balance the conversation.
Well,
Hi, Ron Kelly. How are you doing?
hey, hello, how are you?
How you doing, Pastor Kelly?
Good.
And we've had Pastor Ron Kelly on our channel as well. He's shared some amazing ideas with us and perspective as well. I would encourage that you take a listen to that video.
But the church is sinking, and it needs a prophetic role. And if you're going to stand for the right, though the heavens fall, and call sin by its right name and all of that, some people are going to consider you a bit of a bully, especially if you have confidence. But, you know, if there's something out there I need to say I'm sorry for, I'm willing to talk with somebody about it. I'm not sorry for standing up. I'm not sorry for some of the strength of my disagreement with people. And it's still my hope that some people will say they're sorry and be healed. So I'm not, it wasn't fomenting. I still don't want to foment dissent. You know, I got cut out of my pulpit in 2 days. I ended up with a YouTube channel with over 10,000 followers within a period of probably 24 hours. If I wanted to disparage the church or run people down, I had the platform. It's not my heart, it's not my head, it's not in my mouth. And even now I'm having an honest conversation about where I think the problems are and what I think happened. But I believe things could be made better again. I believe people could say they're sorry and we could go back to trying to work at it. It might be that some changes are needed in some places. But what was done to me, the Village Church and the World Church, is, I believe that was the real bullying. And Ellen White knew it, and that's why she wrote about kingly power. And I do want to say one more time, about 5 years ago, I preached a series on kingly power, defending the organization. Unfortunately, right now, I couldn't defend it like I did 5 years ago. And I feel that my church and my family, and then me personally, have experienced that kingly power and a complete lack of proper process. And bigger than that, though, is a lack of the kind of love that works to redeem somebody. If I was all of those things, then as a lifelong servant of the Lord, there should have been put forth a whole lot more effort to redeem me from myself and from all the people that have been affected by me. But I'm quite comfortable telling you I'm not a bully. I didn't foment dissent. And not a bully, not fomenting dissent, and I'm not insubordinate either. When I was told to ban Conrad Vine, I disagreed with the decision. They all knew it. And yet, in the name of trying to show that I know how to cooperate, but there's probably been few decisions that I disagreed more with how they did that one and the fact that it was done. But I did what they said. And it cost me respect online with lots of viewers, and it caused a lot of question in a lot of people's minds, and even in my own local church. I paid the price as a frontline worker for the poor process and the wrong decision of how Conrad was cut out of his speaking privileges, but I did it because I'm not insubordinate. I do know how to play as a team. And yeah,